Jake Miller stared out the transport window at the massive building below. The Caltharian Military Academy stretched across the red sand like a metal city. 3 silver moons hung in the purple sky above the planet Nexus Prime. Jake had never seen anything like it. The transport landed with a soft thud. Jake grabbed his single bag and walked down the ramp. The air smelled different here. It was thinner than Earth air and had a metallic taste. Other students were getting off their own transports nearby. Jake looked around at his new classmates. They were not human. A group of tall, green creatures with scales walked past him. Their yellow eyes looked him up and down. One of them made a hissing sound that might have been laughter. These were saurians. Jake had studied them before coming here. Near the academy entrance, blue crystal beings floated a few feet off the ground. Their bodies sparkled in the alien sunlight. The Vexians moved without making any sound. Jake watched them glide through, the air like living gems. A ball of bright light zipped past Jake's head. He ducked and turned to see more light beings dancing in the air. The luminals looked like tiny suns with arms and legs made of pure energy. One of them buzzed around Jake's face before flying away. The strangest creatures were the Zephyrites. They looked like giant bugs walking on 2 legs. Their green and black shells gleamed as they clicked and chirped to each other in their own language. Jake was the only human he could see. A loud voice boomed across the landing area. "All new students! Report to the main hall now." Jake followed the crowd of alien beings into the academy. The hallways were huge and made of smooth black stone. Lights in the ceiling gave off a soft blue glow. Everything looked clean and new, but also cold and unfriendly. The main hall was enormous. Hundreds of alien students sat in rows of seats that faced a raised platform. Jake found an empty seat near the back. The chair was too big for him, made for creatures larger than humans. A tall saurian walked onto the platform. His scales were darker than the others Jake had seen. Scars covered his arms and face. When he spoke, his voice was deep and harsh. "I am Commander Vextal. I run this academy." His yellow eyes swept across the room. "You are here because your species believes you are special. You think you are warriors." The commander's gaze stopped on Jake. "Most of you are wrong." Jake felt every alien eye in the room turn to look at him. His face grew hot. He tried to sit lower in his chair. "This academy has trained the galaxy's finest warriors for 300 years, Commander Vextal continued. "We have seen students from every known species. Some succeed, many fail, some die trying." A Vexian student near Jake made a sound like breaking glass. Jake thought it might be fear. "Your final test will be against a terror beast," the commander said. "These creatures are the most dangerous in the galaxy. They have killed many students over the years. If you cannot face a terror beast and live, you do not belong here." Jake's mouth went dry. A terror beast. He had read about them in the academy files, but the information was mostly classified. All he knew was that they were used to test the bravest warriors. "Some of you will leave before the final test," Commander Vextal said. "This is wise. It is better to quit than to die screaming." The commander looked directly at Jake again. "We have never had a human student before. Humans are new to the galactic community. They are soft creatures with no natural weapons, no claws, no armor, no special abilities." He paused. "I wonder if they belong among true predators." Angry whispers filled the hall. Jake heard a saurian behind him say, "Humans are prey animals. Why is one here?" Jake wanted to stand up and say something, but his legs felt weak. He was 19 years old and had trained his whole life for this moment. Earth had chosen him as their first representative to the academy. If he failed, no other human might ever get this chance. After the speech, students began filing out of the hall. Jake stayed in his seat until most of them were gone. He did not want to face their stares right away. "You must be the human." Jake looked up. A young saurian stood beside his chair. This one was smaller than most, with lighter green scales and fewer scars. His voice was not as harsh as the others. "I am Krax," the saurian said. "I think we are roommates." Jake stood up. Even the smaller saurian was taller than him. "I'm Jake Miller." Krax tilted his head. "Miller, that is a strange Name. So is Cracks, Jake said, then immediately worried he had been rude. But Cracks made a sound that might have been laughter. True. Come, I will show you to our room. They walked through more black hallways. Other students watched Jake as he passed. Some looked curious. Others looked hungry, like they wanted to eat him. Do not worry about them, Cracks said quietly. Most are just surprised to see a human. We have heard stories, but none of us have met one before. What kind of stories? Jake asked. Cracks was quiet for a moment. That humans are weak, that they cannot fight, that they make friends with their food instead of eating it. Jake almost laughed despite his nervousness. We do make friends with animals. We call them pets. Pets? Cracks looked confused. You keep prey animals alive on purpose? We take care of them. They live with us in our homes. Cracks stopped walking. Live with them? In the same space where you sleep? Sure. Dogs and cats mostly. Some people have birds or fish. This is very strange, Cracks said. Saurians do not make friends with food. They reached their room. It was simple but clean, with 2 beds and 2 desks. Everything was made for creatures much larger than Jake. He would have to jump to get onto his bed. The other students call you soft, Cracks said as Jake put his bag on his desk. They think you will not last a week here. Jake sat on the edge of his too-tall bed. What do you think? Cracks studied him with those yellow eyes. I think you came a very long way to be here. Soft creatures do not travel across the galaxy to join the hardest military school known. Maybe there is more to humans than the stories say. Jake hoped Cracks was right. Tomorrow, real training would begin. He would have to prove that humans belonged here, even if he was not sure he believed it himself. Outside their window, the 3 moons of Nexus Prime rose higher in the purple sky. Jake wondered if he would live long enough to see them set. Jake's first week at the academy was harder than anything he had ever done. Every morning started at sunrise with combat training in the main arena. The alien students moved like natural-born killers. Jake moved like someone trying not to get killed. The Saurians were the worst to train against. They had claws as long as Jake's fingers and teeth like knives. When they fought each other, sparks flew as their claws hit their thick scales. When Jake fought them, he spent most of his time running away. Stand and fight, human, Instructor Vexna shouted during a sparring match. She was a female Saurian with bright red scales and more scars than Jake could count. You cannot run from every enemy. Jake tried to block as his opponent, a large Saurian named Thekmor, swung his clawed hand toward Jake's face. Jake's practice shield cracked under the impact. He stumbled backward. Look at the soft thing trying to fight, Thekmor said. His voice was deep and mean. It has no claws, no fangs. How does it even kill its food? The other students laughed. Jake's face burned with shame. He raised his shield again, but Thekmor knocked it aside easily. A clawed hand stopped just inches from Jake's throat. Dead, Thekmor announced. Again. This happened every day. Jake lost every fight. The alien students whispered about him in the hallways. Some pointed and laughed when they saw him. Others just stared like he was some strange animal in a zoo. Maybe humans should stick to softer jobs, a Vexian student said one day as Jake limped past with a bruised shoulder. Like flower arranging. Jake did not know if Vexians even had flowers, but he understood the insult. The only friendly face belonged to Lisa Park. She was a human medical officer assigned to the academy to monitor Jake's health. She was older than Jake, maybe 30, with kind eyes and short black hair. You're doing better than the reports say, she told Jake as she checked his latest bruises. They met in the medical bay after his worst training sessions. I lose every fight, Jake said. Yesterday, a luminal shocked me so hard I couldn't feel my legs for an hour. But you keep getting back up, Lisa said. That's something. She handed him a data pad. I've been researching the other species, learning their fighting styles. Maybe it will help. Jake read the files she had given him. Saurians relied on their natural weapons and thick skin. Vexians used their crystal bodies to focus energy attacks. Luminals could control electricity and light. Zephyrits had incredible speed and could fly short distances. What advantages do humans have? Jake asked. Lisa was quiet for a moment. I'm still trying to figure that out. After 2 weeks of losing fights, Jake found himself spending more time in the Academy's xenobiology lab. It was quieter there, away from the other students. Dr. Zinn, a gentle luminal who glowed soft yellow instead of the bright white of the student luminals, worked there studying alien creatures. "You are the human student," Dr. Zinn said when Jake first visited. The doctor's voice sounded like music. "I have read about your species. Very interesting." The lab was full of cages and tanks holding creatures from across the galaxy. Jake saw his first Nexus wolf, a six-legged predator with silver fur and glowing blue eyes. In another cage was a void crawler, a black spider-like creature the size of Jake's head. "These are some of the smaller specimens," Dr. Zinn explained. "The Terror. Beasts are kept in the deep levels, too dangerous for casual viewing." Jake stopped in front of a tank, holding what looked like a tiny dragon. It was no bigger than his hand, with purple scales and delicate wings. When it saw Jake, it pressed against the glass and made soft chirping sounds. "That is a stellar sprite," Dr. Zinn said. "They are usually very aggressive. This one has been hostile to everyone who approaches its tank." But the little creature seemed friendly to Jake. It followed his finger as he moved it along the glass. Jake found himself smiling for the first time in days. "Strange," Dr. Zinn murmured. "Very strange indeed." Jake started visiting the lab every day after training. The creatures there seemed to calm down when he was around. Even the Nexus wolf, which had snarled at every other visitor, would sit quietly when Jake stood near its cage. "You have an unusual effect on them," Dr. Zinn told Jake after a week of visits. "I have never seen anything like it." Jake did not understand it either. He just knew that being around the creatures made him feel less alone in this place full of aliens who thought he was weak. Meanwhile, his training continued to go badly. Thekmor seemed to enjoy beating him up more than the others. The big Saurian had made it his personal mission to prove that humans did not belong at the Academy. "Your species sent their best warrior?" Thekmor asked one day after knocking Jake to the ground for the 10th time. "This is their best?" Jake got back up, even though his whole body hurt. "I'm not done yet." "You should be," Thekmor said. "Save yourself the pain. Go home to your soft planet and play with your pets." Something about the way he said pets made Jake angry. Thekmor had heard about humans keeping animals as companions and thought it was a sign of weakness. "At least I don't have to hurt things. Smaller than me to feel strong," Jake said. Thekmor's yellow eyes grew bright with anger. He stepped forward, claws extended. "What did you say, soft thing?" "You heard me," Jake said. His heart was beating fast, but he did not back down. "Instructor." Vexna stepped between them before Thekmor could attack. "Enough! Training is over for today." As the students filed out of the arena, Krax walked up to Jake. "That was either very brave or very stupid," the young Saurian said. "Probably stupid," Jake admitted. "Definitely stupid," Krax agreed. "But I liked it." That night, Krax told Jake more about the Academy and its history. "The Terror Beast test has been used for over 100 years, he said as they sat in their room. "It is the final exam. If you cannot face the beast and survive, you fail." "What kind of creatures are they?" Jake asked. "Different ones. Void." "Stalkers are the most common. They are shadow creatures that feed on fear. The more afraid you are, the stronger they become." Jake felt a chill run down his spine. "How do students usually beat them?" "With superior firepower, better weapons, faster reflexes. Some try to outthink them." Krax paused. "About 30% of students who face the Terror Beast test do not survive it." Jake stared at the ceiling. 30%. Those were not good odds, especially for someone who lost every training fight. "Do you think I have a chance?" Jake asked. Krax was quiet for a long time. "I have been watching you," he finally said. "You are not like the other students. You do not fight the way we do, but maybe that is not a bad thing." "What do you mean?" "The creatures in Dr. Zinn's lab. They act differently around you. Even the dangerous ones become calm. I have never seen anything like it." Jake had noticed it too, but he did not understand what it meant. "So? So maybe humans have abilities we do not know about yet. Maybe you do not need claws or fangs to be dangerous." Jake hoped Krax was right. But as he listened to the alien sounds of Nexus Prime outside their window, He wondered if being good with small lab animals would help him against a terror beast that wanted to kill him. He had 4 months left before the final exam. 4 months. To figure out how to survive something that killed 30% of the galaxy's best young warriors. 4 months to prove that humans belonged among the stars. The field exercise happened 3 months into Jake's time at the academy. All the students were taken to the wilderness outside the academy walls to practice survival skills. Jake had never been so far from the safe buildings before. The landscape of Nexus Prime was beautiful and deadly. Red sand stretched for miles between tall stone cliffs. Strange plants with blue leaves grew in twisted shapes. Everything looked alien and dangerous. "Stay in groups of 5, Instructor Vexna told the students. "You have 6 hours to reach the checkpoint. Watch out for native predators." Jake ended up in a group with Krax, 2 other Saurians named Hexta and Velak, and a Vexian called Prism. They were not his first choice of teammates, but no one else wanted the weak human in their group. "Try not to slow us down, soft thing," Hexta said as they started walking across the red sand. "Try not to get eaten," Velak added with a mean laugh. Jake ignored them and followed behind the group. Krax stayed close to him, which Jake appreciated. The young Saurian had become something like a friend over the past months. They had been walking for 2 hours when they heard the sound. It was a low, pained howling that echoed off the stone cliffs. The alien student stopped and looked around. Nervously, "Nexus Wolf," Prism said. The Vexian's crystal body flickered with worry. "Sounds hurt." "Hurt animals are more dangerous," Hexta said. "We should go around." But Jake was already walking toward the sound. Something about the creature's cry made his chest tight. It sounded scared and alone. "Where are you going, human?" Velak called after him. "It needs help," Jake said without stopping. "It needs to die," Hexta snapped. "That is nature." Jake found the Nexus Wolf behind a large boulder. It was bigger than the one in Dr. Zinn's lab, with silver fur and 6 powerful legs. But this one was trapped under a fallen rock, and one of its legs was bent at a wrong angle. When it saw Jake, it bared its fangs and growled. The other students caught up to Jake and stopped several feet away. "Stay back," Krax warned. "Nexus wolves can bite through steel." But Jake was not staying back. He sat down on the sand about 10 feet from the trapped wolf and made himself as small as possible. The creature watched him with glowing blue eyes, still growling. "What are you doing?" Prism asked. "Being quiet," Jake said softly. He began talking to the wolf in a calm, gentle voice. He did not know if it could understand him, but that was not the point. He was showing the creature that he was not a threat. "Hey there, big guy," Jake said. "I know you're scared. That rock looks heavy. Bet it hurts pretty bad." The wolf's growling got quieter. Its ears, which had been flat against its head, started to come forward. "We're not going to hurt you," Jake continued. "I just want to help. Is that okay?" He slowly reached into his pack and pulled out his water bottle. The wolf's eyes followed his movements, but it did not growl. Jake poured some water into his cupped hand and held it out. "You must be thirsty," he said. The wolf sniffed the air. After a long moment, it stretched its neck forward and drank from Jake's hand. Its tongue was rough but gentle. "There you go," Jake said. "Good boy." Behind him, he heard Hexta whisper, "Impossible. Nexus wolves do not trust anyone." Jake slowly stood up and walked closer to the trapped animal. The wolf watched him but did not try to bite. When Jake was close enough, he examined the rock that had fallen on the creature's leg. "I think we can move this," Jake said to the others. "If we all push together." "Are you insane?" Velak said. "As soon as it is free, it will attack us." "No, it won't," Jake said. He was not sure how he knew this, but he did know it. "It understands that we're trying to help." Krax stepped forward first. "I will help the human." One by one, the others joined them. Even Hexta and Velak came forward, though they kept looking nervously at the wolf's large fangs. Together, they managed to roll the rock off the creature's leg. The wolf whimpered as its injured limb came free. Jake could see that the bone was broken, but the skin was not torn. "We need something to wrap the leg," Jake said. Prism used energy from their crystal body to cut strips from Jake's spare shirt. Jake carefully wrapped the wolf's injured leg while the creature held perfectly still. It seemed to understand that Jake was helping. When Jake was finished, the wolf struggled to its feet. It could not put weight on the injured leg, but it could walk slowly on its other 5 legs. It looked at Jake for a long moment, then made a soft sound that was almost like a purr. "It is thanking you," Crack said in amazement. The wolf limped away toward the cliffs, stopping once to look back at Jake before disappearing among the rocks. The students stood in silence for several minutes. Finally, Hexta spoke. "I have never seen anything like that," the Saurian said. "Nexus wolves do not trust anyone. They are pure predators." "How did you know it would not attack?" Prism asked Jake. Jake did not have a good answer. "I just knew. It was hurt and scared. It needed help, not another fight." They finished the exercise without talking much, but Jake noticed that the other students looked at him differently now. Less like he was weak and more like he was something they did not understand. When they returned to the academy, word of what happened spread quickly. Other students who had not been there wanted to hear the story. Some did not believe it. "Nexus wolves do not act that way," Thekmore said when he heard. "The human is lying," but Dr. Zinn believed it. When Jake visited the lab the next day, the Luminol was excited to hear every detail of what had happened. "This confirms what I have been observing," Dr. Zinn said. "You have an unusual gift with creatures, all creatures, it seems." "I don't understand it," Jake said. "I just treat them like I would treat any scared animal." "And how is that?" Jake thought about it. "With patience and respect. I show them that I'm not going to hurt them." Dr. Zinn glowed brighter with interest. "Most species see dangerous creatures as enemies to be defeated. You see them as individuals to be understood." Jake looked around the lab at all the caged creatures. The stellar sprite pressed against its tank glass when it saw him, making happy chirping sounds. "Dr. Zinn," Jake said slowly, "what kind of creature is used for the Terra Beast test?" The luminal's glow dimmed slightly. "Usually a void stalker. They are shadow creatures from the dark system. Very dangerous. Have any students ever tried to befriend one?" Dr. Zinn was quiet for a long time. "No student has ever tried anything except fighting one. The idea would be considered insane." Jake nodded, but his mind was spinning with new ideas. What if fighting was not the answer? What if the Terra Beast test was not about being the strongest or the fastest or the best armed? What if it was about understanding something that everyone else only saw as a monster? That night, Jake lay awake thinking about the Nexus wolf. He remembered the look in its blue eyes when it realized he was trying to help. There had been intelligence there, personality, fear and pain and gratitude. If void stalkers were as smart as other dangerous creatures, maybe they could be reasoned with too. Maybe they did not have to be enemies. Jake was beginning to understand that his greatest strength might not be something he could learn in combat training. It might be something he had brought with him from Earth. Something that made humans different from every other species in the galaxy. The ability to see a scared animal instead of a monster. The willingness to try kindness before violence. The question was whether that would be enough to keep him alive when the final test came. The final month before the Terra Beast test arrived faster than Jake expected. The academy became a different place as the exam approached. Students who had been confident before now looked worried. Some packed their bags and left in the middle of the night rather than face the test. 15 students have dropped out this week, Cracks told Jake as they ate breakfast in the dining hall. More than usual. Jake looked around at the remaining students. There were maybe 60 left from the 100 who had started. Everyone seemed nervous and jumpy. Even Thekmore, who usually acted like nothing could hurt him, had dark circles under his yellow eyes. "Smart choice," said a Vexian student sitting nearby. "Better to live as a dropout than die as a hero." The written exams had been easy for Jake. He had always been good at studying, and the theoretical parts of warfare and xenobiology made sense to him. His combat scores were still terrible, but his academic grades were among the highest in the class. "Knowledge means nothing if you are dead," Thekmore said during one particularly brutal sparring session. He had gotten meaner as the final test approached, as if beating up Jake made him feel braver. "Books will not save you from a terror beast." Jake picked himself up off the arena floor for the 100th time that day. His whole body ached, but he did not quit. He never quit, no matter how many times he lost. "Maybe not," Jake said, wiping blood from his nose, "but understanding might." Theckmore laughed, but it did not sound happy. Understanding? You cannot understand a creature that wants to tear you apart. Jake thought about the Nexus Wolf and all the creatures in Dr. Zinn's lab. Every creature wants something. If you can figure out what that is, you can work with it instead of against it. Void Stalkers want to kill, Theckmore snapped. That is all they want. But Jake was not so sure. He had been spending more time with Dr. Zinn, learning everything he could about terror beasts. What he learned was both frightening and fascinating. Void Stalkers are empathic predators, Dr. Zinn explained one evening in the lab. They feed on the emotional energy of other creatures. Fear is their favorite food. So they make their prey afraid on purpose? Jake asked. Exactly. The more terrified their victim becomes, the stronger and more dangerous the Void Stalker grows. It is a feeding cycle. Jake watched the creatures in their cages as Dr. Zinn spoke. A small lizard-like animal was sleeping peacefully in one tank. In another, a bird with metal feathers was singing a beautiful song. What if someone was not afraid? Jake asked. Dr. Zinn's glow flickered with surprise. I do not understand. What if the Void Stalker's prey was not scared? What would happen? Then, the luminol was quiet for a long moment. I do not know. In all recorded encounters, the victims have been terrified. It is natural to fear a creature that wants to kill you. But what if it did not want to kill you? What if it was just hungry and fear was the only food it knew how to find? Dr. Zinn stared at Jake with eyes like tiny stars. That is a very interesting theory, but also a very dangerous one to test. Jake nodded. He was beginning to form a plan, but it was so crazy that he had not told anyone about it, not even Cracks. Meanwhile, Lisa Park had been doing research of her own. She met with Jake in the medical bay more often now, ostensibly to check his health, but really to share what she was learning. I've been studying human evolution, she told him one day, specifically our relationship with other species. What did you find? Lisa pulled up files on her datapad. Humans are the only known species that regularly forms bonds with other species. We domesticated dogs, cats, horses, and dozens of other animals. We kept them not as food or tools, but as companions. Jake thought about his family's dog back on Earth. Max was a golden retriever who slept on Jake's bed and followed him everywhere. Jake missed him terribly. Most alien species see other creatures as either prey, predators, or irrelevant, Lisa continued. But humans see potential friends. We have empathy for creatures that are completely different from us. So? So maybe that is your advantage. Not strength or speed or weapons. Empathy. Jake learned more disturbing facts as the test approached. Dr. Zinn showed him recordings of previous terror beast encounters. Jake watched as brave warriors with advanced weapons and years of training were overwhelmed by creatures made of living shadow. The Void Stalkers seem to grow larger and more aggressive as their victims become more afraid, Dr. Zinn observed as they watched a recording together. This Saurian student lasted 4 minutes before the fear overcame him completely. Jake watched. The student on the screen fired weapon after weapon at the shadow creature. Nothing seemed to hurt it. The more desperate the student became, the bigger and more terrible the Void Stalker grew. In the end, the student collapsed from pure terror before the creature even touched him. How many students have died in these tests? Jake asked. 43. In the past 50 years, Dr. Zinn said sadly. Most from heart failure caused by extreme fear. Some from physical injuries when they panicked and hurt themselves trying to escape. Jake felt sick. 43 students. Young people like him who had come here to prove themselves and had died screaming in the dark. Has anyone ever tried not fighting? Jake asked. What do you mean? Has anyone ever tried just talking to one or staying calm? Dr. Zinn looked at him with concern. Jake, these are not the small creatures in my lab. Void Stalkers are apex predators. They are larger than a hover tank and made of pure nightmare. No one stays calm around them. But has anyone tried? No. The instinct to fight or flee is too strong. When faced with a Void Stalker, every sentient being becomes consumed with terror. Jake nodded, but he was thinking about something else. The night before his first combat training, he had been terrified. But when he faced the Nexus Wolf, he had felt calm. When he worked with the creatures in the lab, he felt peaceful. Maybe the difference was that he was not trying to prove he was stronger than them. He was trying to understand them. 3 days before the final test, Jake made a decision. He went to visit Dr. Zinn one last time. "I want to see the holding area where the terror beasts are kept," Jake said. Dr. Zinn's glow dimmed with worry. "That is not permitted. It is far too dangerous." "I'm not asking to go into the cages. I just want to see them, from a safe distance." After much convincing, Dr. Zinn agreed to take Jake to the deep levels of the academy. They rode an elevator, down for what felt like forever. When the doors opened, Jake found himself in a corridor lined with massive reinforced doors. "The terror beasts are behind these doors," Dr. Zinn whispered. "Each cell is designed to hold the most dangerous creatures known to science." They stopped in front of a door marked with symbols Jake could not read. Dr. Zinn activated a viewing screen that showed the inside of the cell. Jake saw his first Void Stalker. It was enormous, just as Dr. Zinn had said. The creature looked like a living shadow in the shape of some nightmarish predator. Its body seemed to shift and change as Jake watched. Sometimes it looked like a giant wolf, sometimes like a massive spider, sometimes like something that had no name. Red eyes glowed in the darkness of its face. When it moved, it made no sound at all. "Terrifying, is it not?" Dr. Zinn said. Jake stared at the creature for a long time. It was definitely scary. But as he watched, he began to notice other things. The way it paced around the small cell like a caged animal. The way it occasionally stopped and seemed to listen to something only it could hear. "It looks lonely," Jake said quietly. Dr. Zinn's glow flickered with surprise. "Lonely?" "And bored. How long has it been in that cell?" "Several months. We keep the terror beasts contained between tests." Jake watched the Void Stalker pace back and forth, back and forth. It reminded him of the animals in old Earth zoos, before humans learned that intelligent creatures needed more than just food and shelter to be healthy. "Dr. Zinn," Jake said slowly, "what if we have been wrong about them?" "Wrong how?" "What if they are not just mindless killing machines? What if they are intelligent creatures that have been driven crazy by isolation and fear?" Dr. Zinn was quiet for a long moment. "That would change everything we know about them." Jake nodded. It would also change everything about his plan for the final test. He spent the next 2 days thinking about what he had seen. The creature in that cell had not looked like a monster to him. It had looked like a prisoner. On the night before the test, Krax found Jake sitting alone in their room. "Are you afraid?" the young Saurian asked. Jake thought about it honestly. "Yes, but not of dying." "What then?" "Of being wrong." Krax sat down on his own bed. "The other students are betting on how long you will last. Most think less than 30 seconds. What do you think?" Krax was quiet for a long time. "I think you are going to surprise everyone, including yourself." Jake hoped his friend was right. Tomorrow he would find out if a lifetime of loving animals and seeing friends where others saw monsters would be enough to save his life. Tomorrow he would discover if empathy was stronger than fear. The morning of the final test, Jake woke up before sunrise. His roommate Krax was already awake, sitting on his bed and staring out the window at the purple sky. "Today is the day," Krax said quietly. Jake nodded. His mouth felt dry and his hands were shaking slightly, but he was not as terrified as he had expected to be. He had spent months preparing for this moment, not with weapons or combat training, but with something much more dangerous. Hope. "The other students are already gathering to watch," Krax said. "The viewing gallery will be full. Every Terror Beast test was broadcast to the entire academy. It was part of the tradition. Students needed to see what they would face, and the instructors used the recordings to study different approaches to the challenge." Jake got dressed slowly. He had decided not to wear the standard combat armor that most students chose. Instead, he put on simple clothes that would let him move freely. He would not be carrying any weapons either. "Are you certain about this?" Krax asked as they walked to the arena together. "You still have time to change your mind. Take a weapon. Wear armor." "I'm certain," Jake said. He was not, but he needed to sound confident. The arena was huge, designed to hold different environments for different types of terror beasts. Today, it had been set up to look like a dark cave system. Artificial rocks and shadows filled the space. Jake could see cameras floating overhead to record everything that happened. In the viewing gallery, hundreds of students and instructors watched. Jake could see Lisa Park in the front row, her face tight with worry. Dr. Zinn was there too, glowing, dimly with what Jake hoped was encouragement rather than fear for his safety. Commander Vextal stood at the edge of the arena. His scarred face showed no emotion as he looked down at Jake. "Jake Miller of Earth," the commander announced. "You will face a Void Stalker in single combat. You have 1 hour. If you survive, you pass. If you run from the arena, you fail. If you die." He paused. "We will send your body home to your people." Jake walked to the center of the arena. The artificial cave around him was dark and full of hiding places. Somewhere in those shadows, a creature of pure nightmare was waiting to be released. "Begin," Commander Vextal said. A door in the far wall slid open silently. For a moment, nothing happened. Then Jake saw movement in the darkness. Something large was coming toward him. The Void Stalker emerged from the shadows like a living piece of the night itself. It was even more terrifying in person than it had been on the viewing screen. Its body seemed to shift and flow as it moved, sometimes looking like a giant wolf, sometimes like a spider, sometimes like something that belonged in the worst nightmares. Red eyes glowed in what might have been its face. When it opened what might have been its mouth, Jake could see rows of teeth made of shadow and starlight. In the viewing gallery, several students gasped. One Vexian made a sound like breaking crystal and left the room. The Void Stalker stopped about 20 feet from Jake and studied him. Jake could feel something touching his mind, probing for the fear that it wanted to feed on. Jake took a deep breath and sat down cross-legged on the stone floor. The creature tilted its massive head, confused. This was not how its prey usually behaved. Prey ran. Prey fought. Prey screamed. They did not sit calmly and look at it with curious eyes. "Hello," Jake said quietly. The Void Stalker stepped closer, its red eyes fixed on Jake's face. Jake could feel it trying to make him afraid, sending waves of terror toward his mind. He acknowledged the fear and let it pass through him without taking hold. "I know you're hungry," Jake continued in the same gentle voice he had used with the Nexus Wolf. "And I know you're probably confused right now. Everyone who comes in here is scared of you. But I'm not here to fight you." The creature circled Jake slowly, its shadow body flowing like liquid darkness. Jake turned his head to keep it in sight, but he did not stand up or reach for a weapon. "You've been alone in that cell for months," Jake said. "That must be terrible. I had a friend who was locked up once. He was just a dog, but he got so sad and angry that he forgot how to be friendly. Is that what happened to you?" The Void Stalker stopped circling. It was now close enough that Jake could have reached out and touched it. This close, he could see that the creature's shadow body was beautiful in its own way, like looking at the space between stars. "I'm going to try something," Jake said. "If you don't like it, you can stop me anytime." Slowly, carefully, Jake reached into his pocket and pulled out the last piece of candy he had brought from Earth. It was just a simple chocolate bar, but it was the sweetest thing he had. He unwrapped it and broke off a small piece. Then he held it out toward the Void Stalker. The creature's red eyes focused on the chocolate. It leaned its massive head down and sniffed. For a moment, Jake thought it might bite his hand off. Instead, something amazing happened. A thin tendril of shadow extended from the creature and gently took the chocolate. Jake watched as the Void Stalker seemed to taste it, though he had no idea how a creature made of darkness could eat anything. The red eyes looked at Jake with what he could swear was surprise. "Good, right?" Jake said with a smile. "Chocolate was one of the first things humans learned to make special. We've been sharing it with friends for thousands of years." He broke off another piece and offered it. This time, the Void Stalker took it more confidently. In the viewing gallery, the silence was complete. No one had ever seen anything like this. Dr. Zinn was glowing so brightly with excitement that students nearby had to shield their eyes. You know what I think? Jake said as he continued sharing his chocolate with the terror beast. I think you're not really a monster at all. I think you're just a person who never learned how to make friends properly. The Void Stalker sat down, bringing its massive head closer to Jake's level. Its red eyes were no longer glowing with hunger or anger. They looked curious, maybe even grateful. Everyone sees you as something to be defeated, Jake continued. But I see someone who's been alone for too long. Someone who learned that the only way to get attention was to be scary. Jake held out his hand, palm up. After a moment of hesitation, the Void Stalker extended one of its shadow tendrils and gently touched Jake's palm. The contact was surprisingly warm. There you go, Jake said softly. See, you don't have to be scary all the time. The creature made a sound Jake had never heard before. It was deep and rumbling, but not threatening. It sounded almost like a purr. Jake looked up at the viewing gallery and saw hundreds of alien faces. Staring down in amazement, Commander Vextal's yellow eyes were wide with disbelief. I think my time is almost up, Jake told the Void Stalker. But before I go, I want you to know something. You don't have to be alone anymore. If they'll let me, I'd like to visit you sometimes. Would you like that? The creature's response was unmistakable. It lowered its great head and rested it gently on the ground next to Jake, like a giant dog settling down for a nap. Jake reached out and carefully placed his hand on what might have been the creature's neck. The shadow stuff felt warm and surprisingly solid under his touch. Sleep well, friend, Jake whispered. The Void Stalker's red eyes slowly closed. Within minutes, the most dangerous creature in the galaxy was sleeping peacefully at the feet of a 19-year-old human who had never won a single fight. Commander Vextal's voice echoed through the arena, but it was different now. Instead of the harsh authority Jake was used to, it sounded amazed and perhaps even respectful. Test complete. Jake Miller passes. The arena erupted in sound as hundreds of alien students began talking at once. Some were cheering, some were arguing. Some were just staring in shock. Jake stood up carefully, trying not to wake the sleeping terror beast. As he walked toward the exit, he looked up at the viewing gallery and saw Lisa Park wiping tears from her eyes. Dr. Zinn was practically bouncing with excitement. Even Krax was making the hissing sound that saurians made when they were happy, but the most satisfying sight was Thekmor, the bully who had tormented Jake for months. The big saurian was staring down at the sleeping Void Stalker, with his mouth hanging open in disbelief. Jake had not defeated the terror beast. He had made friends with it. 2 hours later, Jake sat in Commander Vextal's office. The scarred saurian looked at him across his desk with eyes that held a new kind of respect. In 300 years of this academy's history, the commander said slowly, "No student has ever done what you did today. We will need to completely rethink our understanding of terror beasts." "They're not monsters," Jake said. "They're just lonely." Commander Vextal nodded. Dr. Zinn has already proposed a new research program to study nonviolent approaches to dangerous creatures. He wants you to lead it. Jake thought about all the creatures locked in cages throughout the galaxy, feared and hated, because no one had ever tried to understand them. "I'd like that," Jake said. "There is something else," the commander continued. "The Galactic Council has been watching your progress here. They want to create a new position, Ambassador for Interspecies Relations, someone who can build bridges between species that have been enemies for centuries." Jake felt a thrill of excitement. "You mean like a diplomat but for creatures instead of just people?" "Exactly." Interested? Jake thought about Earth, where humans had learned to live alongside thousands of different species, where children grew up with dogs and cats and birds as their best friends, where the most dangerous predators could become loyal companions with patience and understanding. Maybe that was humanity's real gift to the galaxy. Not superior weapons or technology, but the simple idea that differences did not have to mean enemies. "Yes," Jake said. "I'm very interested." 6 months later, Jake stood in the Academy's new Interspecies Understanding Laboratory. The Void Stalker, who Jake had named Shadow, was no longer kept in a tiny cell. Instead, it had a large, comfortable habitat with places to hide and play. Other students now came to visit Shadow regularly. The creature had become the Academy's most popular attraction, though only Jake was allowed to actually interact with it directly. "It still amazes me," Dr. Zinn said, as they watched Shadow play with a puzzle toy Jake had designed for it. All those years we thought terror beasts were mindless killers, but they are as intelligent as any of us. Jake scratched Shadow behind what might have been its ears. The creature purred and leaned into the touch like an enormous cat. Fear makes us see monsters where there are just people we don't understand yet, Jake said. Once you get past the fear, you can usually find something worth knowing. The door to the lab opened and Cracks walked in, followed by several other students. They came to visit Shadow every day now. What had once been the Academy's most feared creature was now its most beloved. Jake, Cracks said, we just received word from the Council. There are reports of dangerous creatures causing problems on the Outer Rim worlds. They want you to investigate. Jake smiled and gave Shadow one final pat. The great creature settled, down for its afternoon nap, no longer the terror of the galaxy, but just a friend who liked chocolate and enjoyed having his picture taken with visiting students. Sounds like our next adventure, Jake told his alien friends. Let's go make some new friends. As they left the lab together, Jake thought about how much his life had changed since that first day at the Academy. He had come here as the weakest student in the galaxy. But he was leaving as something much more important. He was leaving as the first person to prove that sometimes the greatest strength was not the power to destroy, but the courage to understand. And in a galaxy full of creatures that everyone else called monsters, that made him the most dangerous human of all,